Good evening and welcome to the Financial Review Committee meeting of April 25th, 2023. So call to order. Madam Secretary, will you please take a roll call?
When your name is called, please answer with here or present. Member Frost. Member Killebrew.
Here.
Member Pagano.
Here.
Vice Chair Mitchell.
Here.
Chair Amezcua.
Here. Fantastic. We have a quorum, so we'll move on to public comment. I'm supposed to read everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We have no public comments at this time.
So do I still have to read this?
No,
I'm happy.
you're good.
Okay. So there are no public comments. We will move on to new business. First item is the approval of the minutes from the January 31st, 2023 Financial Review Committee meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Madam Secretary, can you take a vote?
Member Frost. Member Killebrew.
Aye.
Member Pagano.
Would I abstain since I was absent from that meeting?
Yes. Vice Chair Mitchell.
Yes.
Chair Amezcua.
Yes.
The motion passes by a vote of 3-0-2 with Member Pagano abstaining and Member Frost absent.
Fantastic. Next item is the quarterly financial report ending March 31st, 2023. Staff report.
County Supervisor Cheryl Mariano will be giving a staff report.
Great.
Hi, I'd like to report that the third quarter ending in March 31st of 2023 continued to reflect a healthy fund balance and investment portfolio. It's important to acknowledge that the revenues are tracking above fiscal year 22 and 23 budgeted revenue amounts. General fund revenues are up $2.5 million, which is 8.1% higher compared to the same period last year. This is due to the increase of the city's major revenue sources. The first being TOT, property tax, sales tax, property in lieu, and licenses and permits. General fund expenditures are also higher than the same period as last year, largely due to the one-time $2.1 million additional payment to CalPERS, rise in police services contracts, city attorney costs, operating supplies, landscape park maintenance, and community activities. The city's cash and investment portfolio continues to show and be a reflection of the city's practice of financial prudence and careful review to maintain liquidity and available cash balances. That's it.
That ends staff report. We can answer any questions you guys might have.
What's our fund, do we have a fund balance policy?
Yes, we do.
What would it be?
So if you look on page 1 of the management discussion, you'll see the listing of the budgeted fund balance summary. Actually, go over one column over. So we have our economic stability, our extreme event reserves. So economic stability is 11% of operating revenue. Extreme event is 9% of budgeted operating revenue. And unassigned fund balance is 4 to 7% of original operating budgeted revenue. So those are the policies in regards to fund balance.
So we're meet or exceed them all, basically. with the
We
15.
meet economic stability and extreme event, and we exceed unassigned.
Okay.
Just a question on presentation.
Yeah.
Do you ever illustrate an annualized calculation? Or is timing such that it doesn't give any accurate depiction of actuals? Meaning, so for example, on your general fund revenues, budget versus actual, you took your total current budget, right? And we divided by 12, multiplied by the amount of months we've had, just so I can see kind of, because the year-to-date number doesn't have a lot of weight without knowing the cycle.
The burn rate or?
Yeah.
So the burn rate of expenditures to revenue?
No.
On either side, so on the revenue side and on the expenditure side, if there's an annualized calculation. And sometimes there's particular expenditures that are born in certain periods that won't
Yeah.
be of benefit, but oftentimes if you annualize it, it gives people like me who are coming in cold, looking at everything, a little bit better of an idea.
It's a little difficult with our revenues because of the timing of when we receive them.
Okay.
Like property tax, we receive most of our property tax around November, December,
Mhm.
and then the second large half, April.
Mhm.
And then our property in lieu, we get in two chunks,
I
one
saw
in
that.
January, one in May. And sales tax is really kind of all over the place because what the state does is they give us advances and then they do a true up. So like this month for April, we got our advance for February. And then next month, we'll get the true up for the first quarter of the year.
Gotcha.
So the timing is kind of all over the place, so it's kind of difficult, I think, to do that.
And we do quite a bit of explanation in the long-term financial plan.
Yeah,
On the timing of the revenues.
But on the expenditure side,
We could definitely do it wouldn't actually hurt. We can print a report, I think, that shows budget versus actual and percent up through the year.
Yeah, expenditures would be easier than revenue.
cool.
Yeah,
Be more meaningful,
yeah.
without knowing the underlying flow. But these reports have changed over the years, because we did used to have that, and then the then financial review committee said they wanted to see this, and so yeah, we can produce whatever.
I'm sure, yeah.
But we don't do monthly, we don't break our budget down into monthly to show what you might otherwise see corporate America.
Right.
What you would expect in each month.
Right, exactly, yeah, that makes sense.
So, like when I look at the expenditures, the one-time retirement payment, obviously one time. The city attorney explanation seems like it's one time. The other stuff like the police service, operating surplus, operating supplies, I should say, community activities, did we just like miss these events, or it was like
No.
the increases versus budget? But like community activities, I'm just very curious, like, it's up 111, but didn't we plan for all these events?
Yes.
So that's an increase
From
of
prior.
actuals from prior year, but it's still within current
Oh,
year
still within
budget.
the budget.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Nothing's over budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cause like we were in COVID last year, so we didn't have
Mhm.
all
Oh,
of
okay.
the, right, is that what?
Yes.
was?
Yeah.
There's a number of things. We added some events, and recreation program came back, and go on and on.
Costs went way
Costs
up on
went up.
fireworks.
Do you guys recast your budget? Because that's,
Yeah.
because I was thinking the same thing he was, because I wrote unfavorable a lot, because I was curious. Because it's his original total budget, and this is my thinking, it looks like there's a recast budget, and I'm just
Yes,
curious.
That was our mid-year.
Okay.
Well, it's carryover from the prior year, so we'll have our budget approved by council before
Yeah.
we start the year. And then when we finally close out that prior year, there will be commitments already that we have to ask for budget again.
Gotcha.
Because all of our
That makes sense.
appropriations lapse,
Mhm.
and then we also have things that come up.
Sure.
And every one of those,
It's tough to be like militant. Nope, we didn't put it in the budget.
yeah, no, we don't,
Gotcha.
yeah, we have to have council authority, and the way our code is written, staff can't exceed any council authorized budget, but there is the option or the opportunity, the ability, for the city manager to approve within a fund a budget increase if it's offset by revenue. So we have development project that comes in, not anticipated, but the developer gives us a deposit to pay for all of our additional costs.
Mhm.
We'll increment the expenditure budget up and the revenue,
Mhm.
but there's no change to the fund balance.
Gotcha.
We're allowed to do that.
So as long as it's fund balance neutral, you
Yes.
can reappropriate as
And I
needed.
can't transfer between funds
Mhm.
if it changes the fund balance.
So that's the comment. So if we're all tracking budget, is it page 9 that I'm looking at that would tell me that we are on budget? Or where does it tell me that we're on budget or under budget?
So yeah, so if you look at the last column on page 9, it says budget remaining.
Right?
So that's the difference between the total current budget and the year-to-date activity.
And how do I know that that's enough for the final quarter? Like, I just extrapolate or just assume that Is it pro rata? I don't know.
It depends on what the account is.
Yeah.
Like for salaries, you could probably
Do that?
prorate it, extrapolate it out, but some other items are kind of depending on the time of year, like community services. A lot
Right.
of their stuff is going to happen in the spring and the summer, and then they'll have events like in the fall, and Christmas time.
So, just to be honest with you, like, say if I just read this front part, like, shouldn't it tell me like we're tracking on budget somewhere? Should there be like a sentence that says?
Yeah, it's in the very
Paragraph.
first couple paragraphs.
First
Oh,
paragraph.
track better than, okay. All right. I guess it's just a general statement, but we're tracking, I'll just assume that we're tracking better on everything.
We're tracking better on revenues for sure.
Yeah.
And then we're tracking within our expenditure budget, and we're probably gonna come in
And if we were over
under.
budget, if we thought like, police service or something, we're gonna be above, then we obviously highlight that.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All right, so no news is good news.
And usually if something comes up where we think, like Mike was saying, we'll go back to council and ask for a budget adjustment if
Yeah.
something, extreme happens, that we can't move things around within the existing budget.
Got it. Okay.
So as an example, in fiscal year 20 when COVID hit and we had the Waldorf closed down, the Marriott closed down, we immediately scrambled and we were back in front of council every meeting.
Yeah,
Probably April and May and into June,
yeah.
providing recommendations for changes to the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions from?
I have a question. How
Okay.
come the art and public places reserve balance has been moved to the unassigned balance?
It hasn't, it's just the
Oh.
dollar amount is, if you look,
Rounds.
there's a little footnote on the bottom,
Yeah.
it's like a little over 12,000.
Yeah.
It
So when
rounds
we,
to zero.
so when we round it, it looks like a zero.
Oh, okay, cause it
Yeah,
says
right.
art and public places reserve is restricted by the municipal code, the remaining balance funds is not specifically designated, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha, alright,
The council has to take an action to allocate that money to spend it.
gotcha. Is council gonna take an action on the CASA unfunded pension liabilities? I know we touched on that maybe like a year ago.
I actually got an update last week. CalPERS is still working, so background, the animal shelter, Coastal Animal Services Authority, CASA,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a separate legal entity, a JPA, between the city of San Clemente and Dana Point. They've been in a private pension fund for their employees.
Mm-hmm.
The city of San Clemente moved out of that pension fund about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they left the animal shelter employees. They're legally working for the animal shelter, not
Mhm.
for the city of San Clemente. CalPERS wouldn't let them in for all kinds of technical reasons, and it took 8 or 9 years for them to come around and say it is allowed. So they're working through the process to move into CalPERS. They're doing an actuarial evaluation on the private plan right now,
Mm-hmm.
so they know what the numbers are gonna look like if they transferred into CalPERS. And we know there will be an unfunded liability. We had an estimate from the private plan actuarial that they do every year, and our city of Dana Point's pro rata portion of that would be right around the amount we set aside. So we're kind of waiting until the final numbers come.
Mm-hmm.
But the city of Dana Point's plan was to pay off its portion of the unfunded liability so that it doesn't have to, basically incur 6.8% interest on the unfunded liability being carried by CalPERS. So.
And what's San Clemente gonna do? We have no idea, no idea. And somehow the accounting will be
Yeah.
memorialized so that we
Yeah. No,
don't get a call 5 years later, so wait.
yes.
What is the time frame for the actuary report?
Good question. They're still waiting, so.
Okay.
It
I know this
was-
has been going on for a while, so that's why I
The
asked.
actual report, they had to, there's like these check boxes of steps they have to go through. I think they finally got through the step to initiate the CalPERS actuarial about 2 months ago. So it's happening, I would expect in the next couple months.
Great.
But we wouldn't actually write a check to pay for that our portion of unfunded liability until the entire mechanics of the switchover
Right.
happens, and numbers are hard, if you will.
Very good. Any other questions?
I don't.
Okay.
How much of a surplus are we gonna end up with this year?
We're gonna have a pretty nice surplus. I think you were quoting like 5 million
Yeah.
surplus this for fiscal year 23.
Great job.
Well, it's-
Thank the hotels.
Yeah, right.
They've set records every month.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take a vote on this item.
Member Frost? Member Killebrew?
Aye.
Member Pagano?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mitchell?
Yes.
Chair Amesqua?
Yes.
This motion passes by a vote of 4-0-1 with Member Frost absent.
Okay, I feel like the main event is coming up. The next item is the proposed fiscal year 23-24 and fiscal year 24-25 budget and long-term financial plan. So we'll ask for a staff report.
And mouse died. Oh, there it goes. All right. So this is an overview of the proposed operating budget and capital improvement program for the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 24 and 25. Some of our budget goals in putting together the 2-year budget was to obviously adhere to the city's financial policies, incorporate initiatives and projects from the City Council strategic plan, funding the city's core services, prioritizing investments into maintaining existing assets, replenishing reserves and designated funds as required by city policy, planning for the future, and developing a structurally balanced long-term financial plan. This is an overview of general fund revenues and expenditures. Revenues for fiscal year 24 are expected to be around 46.5 million and 47.9 million in fiscal year 25. And after expenditures are taken into consideration, there's a surplus of 3.4 in 24 and 3.8 in 25. And then after you factor in transfers out, mostly to our CIP fund, to fund projects in there, and also our facilities improvement fund and our coastal transit fund, which funds our trolley program. We're looking at a slight surplus in fiscal year 24 of a little over $100,000, and then a slight deficit in fiscal year 25 of just under $1 million. But most of that is attributed to the transfers out to other funds. And all the city's reserve policies are fully funded. So the Economic Stability Reserve has 11% of proposed revenues, and Extreme Event has 9% of proposed, as well as 9% proposed revenues. And then we have our special purpose reserve. So we have some money set aside for a general plan update. That fund originally had about $1 million in it a few years ago, but we used some of it for our housing element, and also some of it's being used for the public outreach for the general plan update. There's going to be an RFP coming out pretty soon, and we're probably going to need some additional funding for the general plan because we think it's going to be more than $700,000 to complete that project. And then there's the set aside for the CASA unfunded pension liability, which Mike we just discussed. The Art and Public Places Reserve. Our investment mark to market is basically where our investment sat at June 30th, 2022. So it's just book value. It's not actual loss. So, but we have to book it per governmental accounting standards. And then our unassigned fund balances per policy, and actually for both fiscal year 24 and 25, it's slightly above the 7% required by policy.
So when you budget, you have the same mark-to-market from your last ACFR and you don't update it? Like
No,
budget?
because it's as of June 30th, 22, so we don't update it.
We'll have a big bump this year.
Yeah, so this year it'll flip to the other way because the book value will show a gain.
Okay.
Yeah, as you know, our policy is we hold to maturity.
Yeah.
So it's kind of confusing noise, if you will.
So that negative 771 that you have to show, on the statement of cash flows, it gets added back in?
Yeah, it's
Just
not
to
an
get to the
it's not a
fund
real it's not an
balance.
actual loss. It's unrealized loss.
Right, but I guess if you're looking at fund balance,
Right. It
It
comes back
It'll
in.
come back in revenues
Yeah.
when you mark to market again,
Yeah.
or if it matured.
This is just a overview of our revenues. As you can see, most of our revenue, our top 4 revenues, actually in the taxes and franchise category. And as I stated earlier, we're estimating 46.5 in fiscal year 24 and 47.9 million in fiscal year 25.
is that the highest the city's ever had?
On a
Historically?
budgeted basis, but actuals will be this year.
Yeah, because
Because of TOT.
because of TOT. So for TOT for fiscal year 24, we're estimating 15.6 million, and for fiscal year 25, 16 million. This is actually down about 3.7% where we think we'll end this fiscal year. We're actually expecting to end this fiscal year about 16.2 million. And part of the reason we're being very conservative with that number in the next fiscal year is we're expecting a dip in tourist travel and business and meeting bookings being flat. And there's going to be a reopening of a hotel or an inn later in the fiscal year. That has been closed for quite some time.
It's gonna be open by summer.
This
The
summer?
one on PCH.
Yeah, Coast Highway at Palisades.
Our next
Seaside.
Oh yeah, it looks nice.
It's coming along.
Our next highest revenue is property tax. In fiscal year 24, we're expecting 11.3 million. In fiscal year 25, 11.8 million. This is for fiscal year 24, that's a 6.8% increase over the current fiscal year's amended budget. Our taxable assessed value grew quite a bit for receipts for this fiscal year. So the assessed value as of January 2022 determine what the tax bills that were going to go out in the fall, or actually in the summer of 22, which we book as revenue for fiscal year 22-23. So it actually went up 8.9%, which is really huge. But I think it's because the real estate market home sales were bonkers during that time. The estimated taxable assessed value for as of January 2023, which will be taken into account for next fiscal year's tax bills, is anticipated to grow about 4.2%. And then our in lieu property tax numbers, we're expecting 5.5 million in 24 and 5.7 million in 25, and that's tied to the growth or decline in gross assessed property values. So that 4.2% increase is how we figured out the increase based from this fiscal year. And then sales tax for fiscal year 24, we're looking at 6.7 million, and fiscal 25, 6.9 million, which is for fiscal year 24, it's a decrease of about 6.9 million over the current budget. 6.9% decrease over the current fiscal year budget. So a heightened inflation has increased our sales tax numbers, especially like on our our gas stations, as well as, costs at our hotels. And if you go out to eat, you're paying more, and that's all affects our sales tax revenues. But we're also expecting the economy to slow down a bit. Already kind of seeing it in our sales tax numbers. I think our last advance was pretty flat compared to last year. for the same period. So we anticipate, and also we're also losing our third largest sales tax producer, which is Ganal, and we've taken that out of next fiscal year's budget. And then charges for services and license and permits. So charges for services are like what we do over the counter, as well as our recreation program, reimbursable expenses for staff time, and license permits obviously is for mostly permits either in building and planning and also in engineering services. So for fiscal year 24, we're anticipating 1.9 million for charges and services and 1.8 million for licenses and permits. Those are both decreases from the current fiscal year budget of just under 15% each. There's an assumption of some slowdown in building activity. Also, we don't recognize reimbursable costs when we start the budget. We collect deposits, and as that work is being done and we recognize that revenue, we recognize the expense too. It's kind of what Mike was talking about, how he can increase fund balance. He can increase revenues and expenditures as long as it doesn't affect ending fund balance. And so usually when we can recognize a deposit, we increase the revenue as well as the expense. And then expenditures for fiscal year 24 is little over 43 million before transfers out. And then after you factor in transfers out, it's about a little over 46 million. And then in fiscal year 25, it's about a little over 44 million without transfers out, and then with transfers out, it's just under 49 million. And as you'll notice, we have about a $2 million increase in our transfer out to the CIP.
On the CIP, do you guys, those numbers tied to like your deferred maintenance program or your CIP? Do you have a CIP plan that ties to the, you have a loading order of projects, I imagine that's.
Yes, yeah.
So on the CIP side, there's a 7-year plan for all the capital projects, streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, storm drains, that Public Works does, and there will be a separate action when you adopt the budget to also adopt the 7-year plan. We get to submit it to Orange County Transportation Authority as a requirement for a lot of the funding we get. So we have it actually built out in the long-term financial plan, that 7-year plan funded. And then separate, we have a facilities improvement fund that we're slugging through a huge backlog of deferred maintenance because the city wasn't really good at planning and funding, maintaining its existing facilities, but the council adopted a policy 3-4 years ago. So we're still working through that backlog. We're getting there.
So our two largest expenses, and I'll go over the first one, is personnel costs. For the next 2-year budget, we have 66 full-time positions. Total personnel costs for fiscal year 24 is 10.7 million, which is actually a 10.1% decrease from the current fiscal year, but that's because we had that large one-time payment to CalPERS. If you take that out, we're looking at about an 8% increase. We've had we're proposing some position, or at least one position reclassification. Our CalPERS normal cost increase. There's a slight increase to our health benefit. We're budgeting for a health benefit allowance. We budget for health benefit allowance. And then our merit pool, we budget for per our memorandum of understanding with our employees association. And the largest expense we have is our public safety budget, which includes our contract with the Orange County Sheriff Department.
One question,
Yeah.
I remember when we met last week, I think you said on the merit pool, it's up to manager discretion on how to appropriate that, or does everybody get the same fixed amount?
No, it's based on performance.
Okay.
So they get up to 0 to 5% depending on performance.
Gotcha, okay.
So the police services budget, fiscal year 24 budget is 15 million. We have no change in our current service level with the Orange County Sheriff Department. We did receive our second estimate from the Sheriff Department, which came in at 13.7 million, which was 2% less than our current fiscal year contract, but it doesn't include labor. They are entering into, or entered into the labor negotiation with all their labor groups, so we expect an increase later. So we'll bring forward the sheriff's contract, and we'll have the lower number probably in June. And then at some point they're going to get done with labor negotiations and then tell us what the new bill is. But we're planning for that increase, and so we've actually included 14.5 million for that contract, which is about 7.6% increase from the second estimate we received from the Sheriff's Department.
Whatever increase they negotiate, is it retroactive to the start of the fiscal year?
It's whatever they negotiate.
It's whatever. So most likely that's what they'll negotiate,
Yeah.
because the contract ends, I believe, June 30th of this year.
So you're gonna go to the city council with a budget assuming the lower number or the higher number?
The higher number.
Okay.
Because we know it'll be probably a big number, especially for that first year.
Is 15 million enough for police services? I mean, you have, in our current one that we just finished looking at, we had 14.6 million. Is that a big enough increase?
Is that the, sorry.
It's the whole department.
Yeah, so actually this is the current budget, because when we adopted this budget, it was like a year before we got the estimate or the new contract number.
Okay.
So this current fiscal year is
Okay.
about 14 million.
Okay.
So it
That
is
makes
about
a
$1
little more
million
sense.
more, yeah.
Okay.
But before we said we had 66 employees, that does not include the sheriff?
No.
That does not include the sheriff?
That-
Doesn't include the sheriff or the county, cause we contract with the county for a lot of our road related stuff, like striping and painting curbs and picking up garbage all over the place. And, it also doesn't include, obviously, we
There's
contract
38.
out, what's that?
There's 38 personnel, I believe.
I think total personnel,
Total,
yeah, 34 somewhere.
yeah, and then there's like, yeah, a
CSOs
handful of
and,
CSOs.
Crime prevention specialists also. And then we also pay into regional services, so there's about 17 bodies that come out of the Aliso Viejo substation that do regional stuff, directed enforcement and so forth, and we pay a percentage of that included in that contract.
So this is the next 2-year, what Matt has planned for CIP. So the net total 2-year CIP investment over the next 2 years is 19.6 million. The top 3 items, citywide storm drain repairs, water quality diversion repairs, and traffic safety repairs, are more something comes up. There's something that comes
There's
up that needs to
budget
get
for it.
fixed. There's budget for it, and
It's
then
not
go out and do the
gonna
work.
be specific
Right.
issues.
It's not a specific project. We do have about a little over 3.4 million for starting some work on some storm drain repairs. They started work on our storm drain master plan. They're not quite done with it yet, but they've identified some projects that
So that one is our number one.
That's
our
the-
number
yeah.
one issue, if you will.
and then also over the next 2 fiscal years, continuation of getting our roadways, our residential and arterial roadways resurfaced, and doing roadway slurry and repairs. So just to make sure we maintain our roadways to the required pavement condition index. It's 80%.
80 is our target. We're at 84, I think. We may actually have the best roads in the county now. Because a couple of years ago, we were just a hair behind Mission Viejo on that PCI number. I'm gonna bet we're ahead of them now. But I'm gonna beat on that to make sure that he's working toward the 80 and not taking us to 90 and repairing streets before it's needed.
So the Clearway Streets is a huge part of this. Is this Measure M and gas tax money?
Yep. This is the full amount, so this isn't just the general fund portion. So we've got gas tax, Measure M, road maintenance, RMRA, and general fund is the bulk of it. We also have some, at least not in the proposed budget, but when you look at the long-term financial plan, we're getting some federal money as well. We might actually get some money for Stonehill. I know he's applied for it, so we're hoping to get.
So what percentage of this is general fund?
You can go back to the transfer out.
So
It's a transfer out.
it's 2.5 million in fiscal year 24 and another 4 million in 25, but we have some unassigned fund balance that we'll probably be using as well. But the majority of it's coming from those other special revenue funds.
Got it.
But we have to spend some general fund money because per statute, we can't just use all like gas tax to repair a road. We have to have some general fund
That's a
portion.
matching requirement?
Maintenance of effort.
Maintenance of
And we-
effort, yeah.
And we far exceed the amount.
And then we have our facilities improvement fund projects. The 2-year total is about 1.1 million. Some of the big things for at least fiscal year 24 is replacing the flat roof portion of City Hall. We've had a lot of leakage, especially with all the rains. You'll see like little spots like that. So that needs to get done, as well as they're going to replace a couple play structures over the next 2 fiscal years, one at Dana Crest and one at Thunderbird Park. And also in fiscal year 25, they want to repaint the exterior of the PCH Bridge to keep it looking fresh and new. And that's pretty much facilities improvement. And then, as we talked about earlier, general plan update. We have $703,000 in the special reserve account to continue those efforts to get the general plan update done. Right now, they're in progress with the community engagement portion of that, and then they're going to be getting ready to do an RFP for the next phase to actually draft the new general plan based on the input they got from the community and also the city council. And we do think we're probably going to need some additional funding, and then if that's the case, we'll come back to council.
And when we close we're looking to have that RFP done by the time we close we come back in September with our rollover report.
Yes.
So when we're talking about that $5 million surplus from this year, don't be surprised if part of that agenda report, we want to keep some money in the general fund and put it in that general plan reserve to fully fund that next phase. $5 million wouldn't be getting transferred to the CIP fund. So.
And then we have our Doheny Village plan. So our local coastal program amendment was approved by the California Coastal Commission. In the current year, fiscal year CIP, they've started the design for the Doheny Village connectivity project, and then in fiscal year 25, there's funding in there to begin the actual construction of that project.
Including $1.7 million allotted from the federal government, especially in Mark.
And then, as we also talked about, our city-wide storm drain master plan is currently in progress, but we have those high priority projects in the next 2 fiscal year budget totaling $4.2 million. And then part of, so at the last council meeting, we brought the draft long-term financial plan to the city council, and the city council referred it back to this committee, since this committee was going to be looking at the next 2-year budget, and the long-term financial plan is an important component to that process. So the city's long-term financial plan policy is intended to ensure that the city's sustainability is beyond a single fiscal year. The policy defines a planning horizon of at least 5 years. The current long-term financial plan covers fiscal year 24 through 29, which is about 6 years. General fund revenues are projected to keep pace and grow slightly more than expenditures during this plan, and as we talked about earlier, our expenditures are expected to grow, with the largest components being the sheriff's contract, followed by personnel costs. And then the draft long-term financial plan also includes a fully funded capital improvement program through fiscal year 29. And that ends the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Do we have any more grant money for the trolley, or is it expired now?
We're working on it. It goes through FY 29.
29.
One of the, we have 3 grants right now.
Right.
3 tranches. There's one that goes through 29. We've got it balanced out through 27.
Mhm.
And then staff's working with OCTA on,
And
renewing it. Yeah, there's too many communities that want it. I'm pretty confident that it will happen, but until it happens, it's an issue.
gotcha.
One question is, I know you do this long-term financial plan, but really the most important is the subsequent year, right? The upcoming year. We've been doing this for a long time. I imagine if we were back tested to see how close we could actually get to what we're projecting versus when we actually adopt a budget.
Mm-hmm.
Is it pretty dang close?
We always come in over budget on revenues and under budget on expenses. And then we
That's a good problem to have.
we consider that surplus one-time money, and it goes into gets transferred into the capital fund for projects or paying down unfunded liabilities. But yeah, anyway, my prior life with the city of Long Beach, I learned to make sure we have plenty of money for capital, because once you fall behind on repairing your streets, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, storm drains, it's nearly impossible to catch up. Yeah.
Wonderful presentation, see.
Thank you.
So is it the harbor improvements is making a big impact? Where's it making a big impact as you do your projections?
Nothing yet, because it seems to be stalled a little.
We did in the long-term financial plan, I
Yeah.
think in FY 26, we start showing some return, but there's a drag between now and then.
Mm-hmm.
The harbor is not, if they put a shovel in the ground by December, I'll be surprised. They're just gonna continue cash financing the dock replacements at this point,
Mm-hmm.
while they try and figure out how to get financing, because they lost their financing.
Oh,
Oh,
So Bank of the Ozarks was, I think, a $375 million credit line for them, and they walked.
Wow.
So
Marty
just-
Bird.
Well, look what's going on with it.
You said Ozark. I was thinking the exact same thing.
What did you say?
Ozark, the
Marty
TV show.
Sorry.
So they're working on it with the county to find a way to finance it and move on. But right now they're cash financing the dock program.
the biggest impact will be TOT, it'll be property tax, will the assessed values go up because of all of that, right? So everything. Yeah,
We don't have a lot baked in here, so.
yeah, I was gonna
it'll-
say, it doesn't look like.
Nothing in the
chunks.
nothing really in the next 2 years, other than it's a drag on sales tax.
Yeah,
We're just, the assumption is the restaurants that are there are gonna keep operating on a month to month. The hotels will be open, you know, the current hotels will be there at least until FY 26, because they're still at Coastal Commission. We might see some possessory interest, tax, the
Mhm.
property tax for the boats.
yeah,
More here go up as they're replacing docks and the more expensive boats are coming in because the little guys are leaving. But that's a couple of years out.
got it. Very good. Any other questions, comments? So this is just to receive and discuss, so we'll move on to the next item. The next item is the financial policy review. The staff report.
Yeah, so, as we discussed earlier, the city has several financial policies. And if you look at the staff report, we have everything from vehicle acquisition, to operating budget policy, to our pension fund policy, community investment account policy. And, last year we did some minor updates to a few of the policies. Staff doesn't have any recommendations to make any updates right now. What we will be bringing back to this committee probably this fall is a proposal to possibly create a capital CIP reserve account. So right now we have our community investment account where at the end of the fiscal year we put all our surplus funds in to fund kind of larger one-time projects, not just CIP projects, but like Mike was saying, we use some of it to pay down our unfunded liability. That's where we got the $2 million to pay to do that. We also have that Doheny Village improvement account, and so instead of having all these little sub accounts in the CIP, just creating one, putting everything in unassigned, and then developing a method on what a minimum fund balance should be. So like in our general fund, on our unassigned, we require 4 to 7% of general fund starting revenues. So we're going to look at some other agencies to see what other agencies do with their CIP reserve funds, and also what would work best for us, considering we have our 7-year plan. Like, how do we make sure there's enough money in there? Something comes up, we can pay for it.
If you put it in a CIP reserve fund, does it become restricted?
No.
No, because we'll keep it unassigned, but just like in the general fund unassigned, it has to be a certain percentage,
Sure.
4 to 7% of revenues.
It's not legally restricted, so, city council on any given Tuesday can spend it on anything we're legally allowed to spend money on. But by having it in the policy, at least there has to be an explicit action and discussion, so.
Very good.
So unless the committee has any recommendations or wants us to look further into any of the other existing policies, there's no recommended action at this time.
Okay, any questions, comments? I remember the review we did last year.
Yeah, we did quite a bit of, I'll call it cleanup, because, putting them together the first time,
Yeah.
it's easy on paper, but then when you actually went to use them, it's like, okay, this doesn't work exactly like we thought it would, so those tweaks we did
Yeah.
last time, they've worked, so.
Very good. Comments, questions?
I don't have any.
We're good. Well, this is also a receive and discuss. We'll move on to the next item, which is staff reports. You got any staff reports?
So next week, we'll be presenting the proposed budget with the city council meeting as a budget workshop, continuation of the budget workshop to the second meeting in May, and hopefully budget adoption the first meeting in June. So.
Very good. Financial Review Committee member reports, do we have any?
I wanna just compliment C, what you guys don't see, other than her presentation, which was great, was all the numbers are now in our new budgeting system that the council.
You finished.
So, and it tied off to my monster spreadsheets that I've been doing the budget on for the last 12 years or whatever.
So the spreadsheets are gone?
No, I'm still maintaining them.
Glad.
As soon as the council approves the budget and she loads it
Okay,
into the
got it.
accounting system, it's
Got
dead.
it.
So she's got it all in there.
What are you gonna do with all those floppy
And
disks?
producing it this way, it actually pointed out a couple of minor errors I had in my spreadsheets
Right.
that I would have never found. But,
Correct, yeah.
like our personnel numbers came out like $4,700 difference on $10 million, so I think I did pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hanging them up
Yeah.
and turning that
That's
spreadsheet
a
off
huge
for good.
accomplishment for you.
It is.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
So compliments to see.
Yeah. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting. And our next regular meeting of the Financial Review Committee is September 12th, 2023 at 4 o'clock.